All right, so today is a trading recap. We managed to take a W on Nasdaq today. So yeah, let's just go through our setup. So let me just talk about S&P today. Looking at S&P, there was no setups at all. There was no fair value gaps that I could have traded off, and just I don't know, price was kind of funky on that chart. So I looked at Nasdaq and I saw decent setups. You could see prior to market opening, we created, or we didn't create, but we had previous fair value gaps, 1 and 2 right over here. So I decided to look at what price wanted to do and see whether, what was the reaction after the closure. So we managed to close above this, and then we hit the top of this fair value gap, but we closed right over here. So at this point, I was definitely seeing, potential shorts, but we ended up coming to this area again, and I guess you can consider this an inverse fair value gap. So we came to this level and had some support here. So I was thinking maybe we could potentially go long. On top of that, we had a break of structure to the 1 hour. So right over here, I just switched to the 5 minute time frame and was just looking at the chart, and I saw the setup. So right over here, we managed to have a bearish 5 minute fair value gap, but we ended up closing above, invalidating this, and then created an inverse fair value gap. So I just waited for price to come back down to kind of see what happens once it hits the inverse fair value gap. So you can see it hits it and then has a rejection around this area. So to me, I immediately think of an entry right over there. So I scale down to the 1 minute time frame and look for a 1 minute fair value gap, whether it's a regular fair value gap or a inverse fair value gap. So right over here would have been the entry, but I had entries around this area because I think I was spread. And yeah, let me tell you what happened with this trade earlier. But okay, so when I did enter this trade, we managed to almost hit our TP, but price ended up coming back down. I also had a stops at break even, so it completely closed me out of the trade. But then I re-entered after seeing the rejection down at this level. So I re-entered around here, and then I hit TP1. By that time, I was thinking of closing the whole position because of how price was looking. So we entered this trade around like 9:30, and within that time frame, during closing, we never closed above the 1 hour fair value gap. So at that time, I was thinking that if it doesn't close above it, we're most likely gonna retrace and come back down to the other inverse 1 hour fair value gap. So I took take profit one at the below of the 1 hour fair value gap, and then I just had stops. No, I had stop. My stop loss was in profit, and then I was just really looking at how price was gonna react, and it basically came down after it bounced off the 1 hour fair value gap, which I was right. So I decided to close it, I think. Yeah, so I closed the position, making me only like 1%. And yeah, so if I didn't say already, my take profit was below the 1 hour fair value gap, which I think I said, but yeah, so overall we made 1%. But like the trade today was kind of funky because of like how price was just bouncing up and down, up and down. You can see like it was kind of hard because you gotta find like a specific good level or like a specific good entry to trade off, because if you don't, you're just gonna be caught up with some bad RR, I guess. But this is a trade I would have wanted to take if we had the opportunity, but usually what happens to me is I just take one trade a day, if just for the reasons of being disciplined, because let's just say if I do lose a trade, I don't want to take two trades and have like two losses. So one trade a day is good for me. But this would have been the trade that I would have taken if I never found the first trade. So let me just quickly explain that. And you can just see the way that the reaction of how fair value gaps work is just so strong in my opinion. So let me explain. So this candle ends up closing below this inverse, so invalidates this. So meaning that we're most likely to go bearish. So right over here, you could just scale down to the 1 minute and just look for entries, because we closed below the 1 hour inverse fair value gap, meaning that we might go lower because we don't have any support down here no more. And the only support we have is probably right over here. We have an order block here, which is around here, but around this area we're most likely going to target, right? So what I could have done was I could have scaled down into the 5 minute, look for an entry. You can see an inverse fair value gap here, ends up closing below it, and to see that it's actually valid, we see price coming back into the inverse fair value gap and having a rejection off that. So at that time frame, you could just scale down to the 1 minute and enter off a potential fair value gap again. So this would have definitely been the trade that I would have wanted to take, but we didn't get that. We would have TP1 right over here because this is the lows, and we would just let it run because, I mean, look at it. This would have been such a banger trade because there's nothing left to support it unless you have this liquidity right over here. But to me, that could have been my TP2, but like I said, fair value gaps are so important to me. So definitely this would have been a really good trade, but we didn't take that, and that's just a mock-up, so it doesn't really mean anything. But yeah, we managed to make 1% today, so that's the trade of the day.